watching, and I am here today with my Nonfiction November 2020 TBR. I am organized enough this year that I have figured out which books fit the prompts, which are totally optional but very fun. I will link the multiple hosts down below for Nonfiction November. It seems like it's going to be bigger and better than ever this year, with being very active on multiple social media platforms. And it seems like kind of when I get excited about a readathon, I have several things to check. And the first is, have I even counted the number of books that I've put on this TBR? No. Is this a realistic amount? No. Will we maybe be moving this month and I'm going to try to be reading all these books? Yes. So without further ado, let's get into those books. And the 4 prompts are 4 words, and they're very open-ended, up to you, open to your interpretation. And the first one is discovery. So the very first book that I actually started in January and then got distracted, and we all know how 2020 has been, but is Confessions by Augustine. And I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised, at how readable this was. This is a very iconic classic in the Christian faith and just in the broader literary world. And it's Augustine's story of his conversion to Christianity, talking about his childhood and kind of the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of his faith. And like I said, I was just very pleasantly surprised by how approachable it was and what an encouraging read it was for me. So I really want to get to this. It's just kind of like, I feel like, necessary reading, and it just was really intriguing, and not an insult to the book that I then got sidetracked. It's just been a very weird reading year for me, like so many of us. And I'm going to scooch over a little bit so I have room to put pictures up there if I need to. And then also for discovery, Mark David Walsh, if you're watching, this is because of you. I got it. This is called The Lighthouse Stevensons by Bella Bathurst, the extraordinary story of the building of the Scottish lighthouses by the ancestors of Robert Louis Stevenson. So his family built many lighthouses along the Scottish coast. And I've heard that this is just so engaging in the writing style, and it could be a topic that could be really dull, but the way that Bella Bathurst writes it makes it not so at all. And it just sounds really fascinating. In 1786, the Northern Lighthouse Trust was established, and Robert Stevenson appointed as chief engineer a few years later. In this book, Bella Bathurst reveals that the Stevensons not only supervised the construction of the lighthouses under often desperate conditions, but also perfected a design of precisely chiseled interlocking granite blocks that would withstand the enormous waves that batter these stone pillars. So definitely lighthouses are something that interests me, and the fact that it's connected to Robert Louis Stevenson, who's a new author I'm reading now, is very interesting. And I loved just how it sounded so engaging of a read. Then the next prompt is movement. So I have a couple different interpretations for this. The first two, the first one is Pre-Raphaelite Girl Gang by Kirsty Stonell Walker. And it says 50 makers, shakers, and heartbreakers from the Victorian era. I heard about this book from Juliana at Blank Garden, and it sounds really fabulous. And what I love is it has so many pictures. It's such a visual thing. So they had the Pre-Raphaelite painters who were around in the Victorian era had many women who were models for them, but you don't hear about them a lot. So this book has really dug in deep to research these women that, I mean, look at these paintings they were able to create because of these beautiful models that modeled for them. And some of them a few of them they ended up marrying. So just, it looks like a whole range of women. And I feel like it just is another layer to enjoy since it's so visual, and it's such a visual topic talking about the Pre-Raphaelites and their paintings. So it only makes sense it would be that visual. And then I have two that are literal movement. They are travel memoirs. And the first is more an autobiography. And that is The Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole and Many Lands by Mary Seacole. This is a book that's recently been making its rounds on BookTube for Booktober. She lived in Victorian England. She was mixed race and just an amazing woman who I've heard was maybe foreshadowed by Florence Nightingale, but she did so many amazing things. So I'm really looking forward to reading this and hearing straight from her what her life was like, living in Victorian England, being a mixed race woman, and also just serving as a nurse. And she sounds really, really spectacular. And then one that I couldn't fit in during Booktober, but that does not mean I am saying goodbye to it forever, because I'm going to do it this month. And it is Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys. Amelia B. Edwards was an author in the Victorian era, and she also has a couple travel books, also 1,000 Miles Up the Nile. She's the namesake for Amelia Peabody of the, Elizabeth Peters detective series. And I'm really wanting to read this and also 1,000 Miles Up the Nile eventually. But I just have the physical copy of this, so I think I'll get to this sooner. And then interpreting movement literally, I'm going to be reading Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. My husband heard about this from the Art of Manliness podcast, which is a really wonderful podcast that is kind of strives for men to be kind of the Teddy Roosevelt, like gentlemanly masculinity, and just such a huge range of topics that they talk about on it. But they had James Nestor come on their podcast. And the reason I am particularly interested in this, for those of you that are new to this channel, welcome. And I have now had a chronic illness for 2.5 years. It is called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And it is abbreviated as POTS. Those are the initials of it. So with POTS, that really affects your autonomic system. Your autonomic system controls your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature, all of those things, blood pressure, in case I didn't say that. And especially standing up for long periods of time is really hard for me. And a lot of the time I will have abdominal tightening on days that I'm very fatigued and just really intense fatigue. So James Nestor argues that people who practice deep breathing exercises can experience a lot of symptom relief by doing these breathing exercises. And it didn't sound that outlandish to me because I've heard physical therapists talk about this, but it seems his breathing exercises are different than the ones that I've been told. And so I'm willing to try a lot of different things to help me feel better. And it seems like there's just a lot that my husband learned from reading this, because he just read it and it sounds fascinating. We do a lot of shallow breathing now. We aren't really in touch with our breathing. And so it just sounds fascinating and hopefully pretty helpful. Then we move on to the time prompt. And I have here several like diaries and journals. So, talking about the time that they had, the time that day. And it just seems very much, these things will have a very deep sense of time in them. So the first is one, this also, I could have read this over Booktober. I wanted to save it for Nonfiction November. It is Maud, the Illustrated Diary of a Victorian Woman. It says adapted by Flora Fraser. It does not give the last name on this cover of Maud, the woman who this diary belonged to. But what made me really want to read this is an illustrated diary. The woman, Maud, who wrote the diary, was also an amateur painter. And so you can see there's text along with pictures on every single page. So I think this will just be so fun, seeing her day-to-day life. And then illustrations. She was, like I said, and this an amateur painter, and so it'll just be such a feast for the eyes. And then the other journal I have is Bring Me a Unicorn, diaries and letters. So this will have some letters of Anne Morrow Lindbergh from 1922 to 1928. She was married to Charles Lindbergh. She also wrote The Gift from the Sea, which is a very iconic book that I know a lot of women especially really love. It's just her day-to-day life. And I've heard really good things about her journals. I think these are all out of print, so I did buy this used. And there also are some pictures that are included, and I've just heard it's really great. So I really do enjoy this kind of thing. And then also a book I bought a year ago, Gathering from the Grassland, a Plains Journal in South Dakota. And she just has a lot of books that she's written just about her farm life in South Dakota. And I feel like the climate there, it is no joke being a farmer in South Dakota. So it will be very informative. Okay, then we move on to Buzz. Oh, you may have seen my announcement video. Along with Kirsty Lewis, I'm going to be hosting a read-along for Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollenstonecraft and Mary Shelley by Charlotte Gordon. I'm really looking forward to reading this. We will have 2 Zoom discussions. If you want to participate, don't forget to give me your email address so I can send you an invite to the Zoom session. I will link the announcement video down below for more of the details with dates and everything. And I hope you will join us. I cannot wait to get to this. And then one that is really unusual sounding, and I happened upon it on my library's website, and I'm going to read the synopsis because it's really hard for me to even get a handle exactly on what this is about. So it's called The Telling Room, and it's by Michael Paterniti. It says, in the fall of 1991, while working at a gourmet deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Michael Paterniti encountered a piece of cheese. Not just any cheese. This was Parmo de Guzman, a rare Spanish queso reputed to be the finest and most expensive in the world. The cheese carried its own legend, made from an ancient family recipe in the medieval Castilian village of Guzman. The cheese was submerged in olive oil and aged in a cave where it gained magical qualities. If you ate it, you said, you might recover long-lost memories. Too broke to actually buy the cheese, Paterniti made a quixotic vow that he would meet this cheese again someday. Flash forward 10 years when Paterniti has finally found his way, family in tow, to that tiny hilltop village to meet the famous cheesemaker himself, a voluble, magnetic, heartbroken genius named Ambrosio. When Paterniti discovers in Guzman is nothing like the idyllic slow food table he has imagined. Instead, he wanders into and eventually becomes deeply implicated in the heart of an unfolding mystery in which a village begins to spill its long-held secrets and nothing is quite what it seems. Just very intriguing sounding, and I mean, I am here for the cheese. Like, I'm definitely going to want to be eating some cheese while I read this. It just sounds so different, and that's what I liked about it. Then also for Buzz, and I'm feeling very apprehensive about this, but it is time. I'm going to buddy read with Megan Hannett, The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell. This, in its time, when it was published, made a lot of buzz. And there were lots of people that wanted to sue Elizabeth Gaskell. And people now say it's like a terrible, biography. But I'm very, very defensive in Elizabeth Gaskell's case. And I think people come down too hard on her. But I want to read it just so I can say I've read it. Yes, so I come at it very apprehensively, but I should read it. Okay, then just a smattering of randomness. The first is The Yorkshire Shepherdess. I have the audiobook of this on Audible, and I made sure I listened to the narration, and I really like it. This is about a woman who she's written several books now. I think when the first one comes out, she has 6 children, and she lives on this sheep farm in Yorkshire, and it just sounds fascinating. Kind of like, the farmer version of All Creatures Great and Small, the James Herriot books. So I really am looking forward to reading this, and if I like it, then I have several more by her. And I'm sure there will be some humor, there will be some really sad things, but I'm looking forward to it nevertheless. And then I referenced earlier chronic illness. So 2 things I want to read in reference to chronic illness. One is called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way by Lysa Terkeurst. And she does not have a chronic illness, but she's had a lot of suffering in her life. And this book is about learning to have contentment. Because, you didn't imagine your life being this way, but this is the way that your life has turned out. It hasn't happened by accident. This is the way things were always going to happen. And hopefully it will just be really encouraging, because it can be really discouraging to have this daily, kind of daily grief over your health not being what you want it to be. And then I think it will be so encouraging. I'm actually going to be reading through this teeny little book. It's a 31-day devotional, Chronic Illness, Walking by Faith, written by Esther Smith. I'm going to be doing this as a buddy read with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf and Kirsty Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. They both also struggle with chronic illness, so I really didn't feel comfortable doing this. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing this with someone who doesn't suffer from it, because I think it's really hard to totally get it unless you are going day by day by day living with it. And so I think it will be a really encouraging thing for all of us, and especially the author herself has chronic pain, really intense chronic pain. So I think it will be really challenging, but really encouraging. And then I want to read, as long as the library hold comes in, Breaking Bread with the Dead. I heard about this from Modern Mrs. Darcy, and this is a book about why we should read classics. So I was like, well, yes, I am such an advocate of that. I want to read this and feel kind of encouraged and spurred on to maybe even try those classics that I feel really intimidated by. Those are all the books that I know I can't read, but I still want to read them. We'll see how many I get to. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you're reading for Nonfiction November if you don't have a BookTube channel. And if you do, please link your TBR down below, because I would love to see it. And thank you very much to the hosts that I will have linked down below for this wonderful reading event. And I'm really looking forward to it. Have a lovely day.